Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is Jim Schleckser. He's the founder and CEO of the CEO Project, and he helps leaders grow companies. So, with 30 years of business leadership experience, Jim has led global organizations in public and private environments across many functional areas. He is also the author of two best-selling published books. He's been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and NPR. His ideas have been translated into 9 languages, and he's done business in over 42 countries. So before I tell you a little bit more about Jim, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Mark.
42 countries, does that cover every continent but Australia? Or not Australia, Antarctica. I meant to say Antarctica. My mistake.
Yep. Every country except for those two, or every continent except for those two. So I've got some work to do.
So I tell you a little more about Jim. He has a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Delaware, an MBA in marketing and finance from the University of Connecticut, and he holds a doctorate in business administration from the University of Maryland Global Campus. So Jim also today serves on multiple for-profit and nonprofit boards. He's an avid soccer player, a prolific reader, and I love this part, a certified sommelier.
Got it. We can drink some wine together when we're ready. I'll have fun.
Yeah. It's midday. I don't have any wine in front of me. We should have scheduled this for 5 o'clock. Perhaps.
In England, it's like 6 already. Come on.
It's 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock somewhere. Maybe later on, I would love to ask you a little bit about wine mistakes that consumers or even professionals might make. But first things first, the main question, I'm really curious to hear from all the different things that you've done and you are doing, Jim. What's your favorite mistake?
Early in my career, and I probably still suffer from it, optimism. And it's funny, people follow optimists. You want to be an optimistic leader. You want to be positive about the future. But early in my career, I was too optimistic. I projected outcomes that were just not going to happen. And I didn't have the realism filter on my lenses. And caused me and my organization to overcommit. I got them and myself into a heck of a lot of trouble as a result of it. Ultimately, I had to leave that organization because I damaged my credibility so badly by being just too damn optimistic. And so I'm still optimistic, but I try to listen to people when they go, hey, that may not work out. I do try to listen much better than I used to. So that was a learning. It was a kind of a hard learning. I mean, it ended up turning out just fine, as many of these things do. But optimism, superpower and fatal flaw in the same feature.
Yeah. You get lift off, but you get a little too close to the sun, or I don't know if that's the right analogy. But so tell us, I mean, where did you overcommit to business goals, sales goals, timing on projects? Can you give us some specifics of what was involved there?
All of the above, but most importantly, revenue goals. It was a relatively early stage company. We built capital equipment for other manufacturers to clean and help them manufacture their products. So the sales were kind of lumpy. They were big projects, and we'd get them or we wouldn't get them. And I was always, too optimistic about when we would close these things. So it was some combination of revenue and timing together. And it wasn't like we had 100 orders a month. It was a handful or two a month. And so, if I was wrong on a couple, we pretty materially missed the month. Also, just because when you got the disease, you got the disease, there were product developments that I were doing in that business. And, I was overly optimistic about when they'd hit the market and the revenue they'd generate. So, both on timing, revenue, ultimately, therefore, profitability, project launches. I mean, I kind of did a little bit of everything in terms of screwing up. So, it was, not my finest moment. We did good work, but, and the problem is I had a
Yeah.
guy I worked for, a guy who was the CEO of the entire entity. This was when I was a division president, who was pretty hard on that. Like he expected me to always deliver. No negotiation, no appreciation for the complexities of what's going on. And so we had a difficult relationship as a result, which is part of why I ended up having to leave the organization.
Yeah. I mean, when you say, and thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
And when you say it was hurting your credibility, did you get direct feedback? Was there kind of an ultimatum, or did you just get a sense that it was better to move on and try again?
So I've never really told this story before, but he came
Yeah.
down and met with my management team and talked about what was going on and so forth. I was not in the room. I was not invited. Um, and really with the question of should Jim be leading this business or not, right?
Hmm.
And at the end of that, they had a thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know what the count was, but I think he had a
Yeah.
preordained conclusion anyway. I ended up rolling
Hmm.
back to just VP of sales.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, my career is pretty well done at this place. So it was a pretty clear signal
Yeah.
as a result of that. I mean, I guess the blessing was there was enough value that I wasn't fired, but I took a little step
Hmm.
back in my career as a result of it,
Yeah.
and we overcame it. But it was not a great
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. You raise, I mean, I think, a really important point when it comes to listening to the input of others.
Yeah.
And I mean, if an optimist runs into a skeptic or a cynic, or like, how do you find the balance? Because being the optimist doesn't mean you're wrong. Being the cynic doesn't mean you're right. There's judgment calls to be made. Have you learned more about finding that balance?
Yeah, I try to buffer my commitments just intrinsically now. And also when I hear a pessimist who all claim they're realists, by the way, but they're pessimists, they go, I go, okay, so let's just talk about it. What's the probability of that happening? What would we do if it did happen? What can we do to prevent it from happening? How are we going to handle if it does happen? And then build that into the plan. So I'm not sort of blindsided when things don't quite go as hoped. So between the buffering and being more is instead of ignoring them, which is what I used to give them the Heisman,
Mm,
bam,
yeah,
I don't want to talk to you.
yeah,
Now I go, okay, let me understand your concern. Let me understand all of those factors
mm,
and build that into the plan. And at
mhm,
the end of the day, it makes it a more robust and deliverable commitment. So, and they feel heard as well, which I think is
right,
important to keep everybody on sides.
yeah. I mean, they are being heard. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Um, I think of corporate settings. Yeah, and trying to find this balance. You hear some people preach the acronym SMART
Yeah.
goals,
Yeah.
of which the A is attainable or achievable. I think do we have an achievable goal? Corporations also love to talk about stretch goals. So I mean, it seems like it's this matter of like, if we again, like finding balance of having, you don't want something that's too easily achievable, or have people sandbagging when they're setting their goal because they know with certainty they can hit it,
Yeah.
versus a stretch, or I'm trying to remember, I think I've heard the phrase a super stretch
Oh,
that went
wow.
beyond
That's
a,
ambitious.
a stretch. I mean, what do you see as best practices as you're advising or hearing from other CEOs about achievable versus a stretch that maybe the benefit of stretch goal is it pushes us to do more than we thought was achievable.
Yep. Yeah, I like to build the base case and then build the plus minus columns. So here's what we think we're going to attain. But if this goes the wrong way, we'll be down by 5%. If this positive thing happens, we'll be up by 10. And we sort of, and there's usually a few on both sides of the equation. My sort of sweet spot is I want about a 60% plus so if you think about a standard distribution in terms of
Mhm.
probability of outcome, a stretch goal would be, to the right of the hump, right, or whichever way you're looking at the curve, right? But a lower probability of success. But wow, if we happen, great. I prefer to project below the hump, meaning like a 30-40% probability of not making. Most of the probability is we're going to make it if any of these good things happen, or maybe if a few of the bad things don't happen, we're good, and then we can overperform against it. I think it builds momentum for your team. It builds credibility. And because you're transparent about the puts and the takes, and you're discussing it amongst yourselves and maybe to your board or whatever, they can't say you're sandbagging. I'm like, look, I'm telling you what the ups and downs are. Like you can argue me to a higher number with a lower probability of success. That's an option. But here are the implications of that. Like you could lose momentum in the team. We don't feel like we're winning anymore. And economically, they may not make their bonuses, which they all obviously want to make. So I like a higher probability of making than not, and then transparency on the puts and the takes drive me higher or drive me lower. That tends to be a more robust conversation than show me your stretch goal. Well, I don't know. I'll take my goal and add 10%. I don't know what to do, right? So I like that.
Right.
And I think most particularly when I'm projecting revenue, I'll project expenses at that lower level as well. And therefore, when I get the extra revenue, it contributes at a far higher incremental profitability rate.
Sure.
So now you really crush the profitability numbers, which is always a lot of fun for everybody.
Yeah. Anybody can add 10% to a number, but being able to think through it with some logic and business basis of what a meaningful stretch would be. I mean, one other question, because I remember, this is going back a long time for me now, but being in corporate settings where there were stretch goals, and I think, and you read about this in the news sometimes, where I think the one risk with the stretch goal is when people fear punishment or being fired for not hitting the stretch goal, and you see all sorts of dysfunctions of people distorting the numbers. In the auto industry, certain automakers would pull ahead sales from the future quarter. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're in worst cases fudging or distorting the numbers. Short of fraud, but dysfunction. So I'd be curious what advice you would have to make sure that stretch goals don't turn into something really dysfunctional.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question of ethics, and I don't know that I can build a management system that ensures ethical behavior. I mean, inevitably, we count on the decision making, the ethical standards, the morals of the people that work with us and for us, and so I think you just got to get people to go, look, I'm going to call balls and strikes, and that's the way it is. And if we're off, we're off. I'm not going to tweak the numbers. And I've seen organizations where it was pretty overt manipulation of numbers to ensure bonuses. I'll give you, for example, they had some very bad debt, old stinky debt that had not been collected for a very long time. Any reasonable accounting system would say after 90, 120 days, you reserve for that because the probability of collection is pretty darn low. Well, they didn't. They barely squeaked in and made sort of maximum bonus. Had they accrued appropriately, they may or may not have made their bonus at all. And I'm like, come on, boys and girls, that is just not cricket when you pull a move like that. So it does happen in subtle and less than subtle ways, but I think you just got to count on the ethical behavior of people. And back to the credibility thing.
Yeah.
Once I've seen that you're going to be unethical, tell me how I'm going to trust you again.
Sure.
So it's a real problem when you go down that slippery slope.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I'd love to hear the story behind the CEO project.
Sure.
Tell us about that and what it means to have, a peer group for CEOs to meet.
Yeah. So this goes back to Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. He talked about the idea of a mastermind group that you would have around you that has no agenda except your success, and they contribute to you with the group mind to come up with better ways to solve your problems, better ideas. They maybe hold you accountable. That is exactly what a CEO peer group does for you. It's a mixed group of people, different industries, different backgrounds, around you with no agenda except to see you do better. By the way, they're there for the same reason. They want to do better, and they want you to hold them accountable. Most of the people that are in CEO peer groups don't have the most effective boards. Most boards aren't incredibly effective, or they have no board, or they have a family board, or whatever. And this supplants that. It provides accountability, pressure checking your strategy, helping you bust through critical constraints that are stopping you from growing. And it becomes an infrastructure element of a high quality CEO that says, hey, I don't have all the answers. I need a bunch of smart people around me to help me. And this is a very difficult job because there's some issues we run into that we can't just go to our board and we can't go to the people that work for us. So who do we talk to? Well, maybe your significant other, maybe if you're lucky, but a peer group can provide that on a sort of ongoing basis. And we see people join them and sticking with their team, with their CEO peer group for a decade more. I mean, it really does become part of their infrastructure, how they run their business.
And how large are these peer groups?
Yeah, we tend to keep them to 8. There are some other organizations on the planet that go bigger. What my view is that it's very hard to have team behaviors when you're above 7, 8 is kind of the maximum. Think about the squad size in the Army. It's 8. They do that for a reason because it works. And so we're not busting any new turf here. This is an existing idea. But I think when you go up to 12, 14, 16, it's more of a crowd than a team. And here you get high levels of trust, high levels of engagement. Nobody can hide. So we like 8 as a target number. Sometimes a little bit smaller, but that's our plus or minus number.
Yeah. Does the cohort tend to stay together? I imagine once they've gotten to know each other, that they've built trust, that it's helpful to keep that, not add somebody new into the mix once that's really formed.
Ideally not, but and they do tend to socially bond and professionally bond. And the beauty of the business model is that creates a very sticky offering. People, it's like you join a gym and you end up with some gym buddies that, hey, you're going to work out this week, right, Mark? I'll see you on Tuesday. And you're like, oh, damn, I got to go to the gym. It's the same thing. They're going to show up for you. They want you to show up for them. And so it gets very, very sticky. Now, once in a while, people do leave groups. I mean, that happens. Usually, and the number one reason for us is they sold their company for a big pile of money and they go, hey, I'm going to Tahiti or whatever. Which is a great answer, but then we do need to replace. And so we do bring people into existing groups, usually because there's such a high level of trust and transparency already in the group. As long as you get a quality individual, they are very accepting of bringing somebody in. People merge right in. It does not take long. If somebody's not a fit, and that's really down to the leader to pick good people, me, they get, they kind of get voted off the island pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, they might fit better with a different cohort for whatever reason.
Sometimes that happens. We move into another group. That sometimes works. And also, when people grow really fastly, sometimes quickly, they sometimes grow out of their group. We do have larger company groups that we can move them into to keep them challenged the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of the expression that you hear a lot. It's lonely at the top. I don't know the origin of that.
It's popular.
Phrase.
Yeah.
There's truth to that, it seems. Tell us about that.
Yeah, 100%, because you don't have people to talk to that really understand the job. I mean, even the best COO kind of comes from where they come from. They've never done the job of CEO, and it is a unique job. So who do I ask questions to? Who do I bounce my thinking off of? Who, without them having an agenda? It's the problem. You go talk to your chief revenue officer or they all have an agenda. It is an unintended bias, but they've got a bias. In a group, they're neutral to your particular problems. They have their own bias because of their experiences, but they're not trying to get anything out of you except help you do well. A CRO might say, there's an opportunity to bump my budget a little bit or get that salesperson I want in Topeka and I've seen it, in some organizations. They say, well, there's none of those politics like that in my organization. Let me assure you, there's always, whenever there's 2 or more people, anybody who's been in a relationship knows there's a little bit of politics in every organization. It can be low, but it's there. And so, and you can't go to your board. Let's say you have a decent board and you go, hey, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I don't actually know exactly what to do here. That is a career-ending conversation, but you could have it with your peer group. I'm really confused. I'm not sure what to do. And they'll help you. And so that's what it creates. I hate to use the word safe space, but It's a safe space, a high trust environment where you can really get transparent and go, hey, I'm really kind of stuck and I need some help. And they'll rally. They'll rally.
Yeah. Jim, I know one thing that you advocate for when it comes to CEO effectiveness, and I'm going to throw out, it's an interesting phrase, so I'd love to hear your explanation or some stories behind it. The quote unquote lazy CEO.
Yeah. The book is great. Great CEOs are lazy, and what I found, and I've interviewed thousands and thousands of CEOs at this point. What I found is the really good ones did not work 80 hours a week. They were very much in control of their time. They worked 50, 60 hours a week. And literally, I would ask the question, how many hours a week you work? And if somebody says 80, I'm like, they're probably not a very good CEO because they're not in control of their responsibilities in some way. And so this is wild that the people that work less get better results. And that was really the genesis of the idea. It turns out that they're following a very well-worn path. There was an Israeli physicist by the name of Eli Goldratt. The Goal. He wrote The Goal,
yes.
Right? Goldratt, it turns out that this theory of constraints is a general systems theory. He applied it to a manufacturing operation saying, hey, there's usually one machine that paces the whole factory. It might be a paint booth. It might be whatever. But everything is controlled by how much I can get through the paint booth. He said, if you can open up the capacity in the paint booth, you get more capacity in the entire multi-million-dollar plant. Same thing's true in your business. There's a point of constraint, a kink in the hose, if you will, that if you can find it as a CEO and open it up, you change the performance of the entire business. Well, it turns out these really good CEOs that were working 50 hours a week, that's what they did. They spent 30, 40% of their time finding the kink and opening it up. And all the other junk that we do as CEOs, they shrank down into whatever the residual time is. Because they said, look, the most valuable work I do is find the kink and open it up. Everything else is secondary. And they subordinated all the other work they had to do. And that's how they got down to 60 hours. So like, I'm not going to that meeting. I'm not showing up for that. I'm not looking at that report. I'm not. So I can create time for this. And I'll only work on the stuff that matters. So that's, now you don't need to buy the book, but that's the gist of the book.
Well, no, I'm sure. Well, I'm sure there's there's a lot there. I mean, I'm going to not name names, and you might realize, or the listener might realize who I might be referring to. So, if a CEO brags about working 120 hours a week and bringing a sleeping bag, because they're bragging about sleeping overnight because they alone can fix things, it makes me wonder, how much is that really helpful? How much is that performative? How much of that is just ego driven?
There's an ego thing
to say you're sacrificing.
There's an ego thing that I work really, 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 really hard. I work harder than anybody else. I'm a Superman or Superwoman, or I'm like, there's a story about, I can't remember. I think it was De Niro and Olivier were in a movie, and De Niro is a scene where he's supposed to be really, really tired and just on his last strings. So he stayed up for 3 nights in a row and shows up on the set, and he's like haggard and, beard, and Olivier, classic fabulous actor, goes, or dear boy, you could just try acting, right? And my point is, working 1 billion hours is just for show, man. It's all about the results. If you can figure out a way to get them done in 40, then I actually admire that more than plowing 100 hours at it, because I'm sure bunches of those hours are not particularly effective.
Sure.
And you're not effective when you're working 100 hours a week. I mean, you're not sleeping but 20 hours a week. I mean, I pulled all-nighters. I did not do my best work after an all-nighter.
Right. I think you're working with CEOs, and when I'm doing process improvement work, I'm often working with frontline employees in an organization, and I've said many times, half jokingly, half seriously, that to a point, laziness and efficiency are the same thing.
Absolutely.
I think it's a question of like, well, how do you redirect the freed up time? Like if the issue is we're working overtime every day and we're burned out on that, the quote unquote laziness and efficiency means we can get our work done and go home on time. Or if we've freed up other time, we can use it in a beneficial way. We're not just sitting there scrolling our phones because we made things more efficient. But
and
yeah, I mean,
that's a
go ahead.
challenge for a frontline worker, right? Like, okay, you want me to be more efficient, but then what? Am I like working myself out of a job? Am I sacrificing my overtime, which I've kind of gotten addicted to at this point? So it's a hard conversation for frontline people because it almost runs against their own interests
Yeah.
of job security and income. Unfortunately, I think you really need to do it. You really need to. There's a great Bill Gates quote that's in my book. It says, if I have a difficult task, I find a lazy person to do it because they'll find the most efficient way to do the task.
Yeah.
So to your
Yeah.
point, laziness and efficiency are combined. I'll give you another example. This is ages ago. I worked for a company that had one of our divisions supplied automotive parts, critical automotive parts for carburetors. So that gives you a feeling how old this story is, and floats for fuel gauges. And union went on strike. And the union went on strike. They had 160 union members. We had no choice but to keep the plant running because all the big automotive makers use the product and they'd be shut down without it. So management started running the plant, and there were only 60 people in management. And so they're out there making product and shipping product and trying to do their day jobs. And they did this for about 3 months. And while they're doing it, they go, we've got to figure out a better way. We have absolutely no choice. We can't have 160 job here. We need to figure out a way to do it with 60. They did, over moving machinery, modifying processes, coming up with better, cheaper, faster ways.
Yeah.
Union finally came back. Same amount of money they left on, by the way. They didn't get anything ultimately. We brought back 80 union members. So that's the point, that they could have been working themselves out of jobs, but they didn't because it was not in their interest to do so. Right. When there was a need to do it, there was a burning platform to work with. Well, son of a gun, we can do it with 80 instead of 60. Not good for the union, I hear you, but good for the company long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you describe, I mean, to me, this sounds like classic, process improvement, that you're not going to double your efficiency by trying twice as hard. And I'm sure person to person, the management people filling in weren't as good at the job as the frontline people had been. So, I think making work easier is a great motivation as long as that fear factor is put aside. So I've seen companies, and I think things you read about companies that have used, whether it's theory of constraints or lean manufacturing or Six Sigma, or a lot of these companies say point blank, and they hold to it, that no one's going to lose their job because of productivity improvement. We're either going to grow the business. Maybe as people retire or leave voluntarily, we don't replace them. But the people working are not going to be overburdened, and they're not going to lose their jobs. So GM, I mean, that's where I started my career 30 years ago. GM had the problem of a forever shrinking market share. They couldn't grow their way out of things, and they had the union contracts, and eventually went bankrupt. But sadly, anyway, that's a real concern. I think even manufacturing companies, hospitals, and sometimes the challenge is we can't get people. That's the burning platform for efficiency, because people are overburdened, working overtime. Let's make it more manageable.
We have one member who's in the CEO project, and they're in Savannah, and there's a gigantic Hyundai plant being built in Savannah at the moment. And they're like, there is this giant sucking sound of all the employees to go work for Hyundai. I mean, it's a good paying job. It's stable. I don't know if it's union or not. It doesn't matter. But they're paid
probably
well.
Non-union.
Benefits are good. The whole deal, right? And they're like, how the heck are we, relatively smaller company, going to compete with Hyundai? So they've been working hard on exactly that. We've got to figure out a way to do the work with less people, because we will not be able to get the people as that plant opens up. And so, that can become the imperative sometimes.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask a couple of questions, about CEOs, and we talk in this podcast a lot, and you did so earlier, talking about admitting a mistake.
Yeah.
saying things like "I was wrong," and you know, is there fear? I'm asking you to generalize, but you know, is there fear that doing so makes them seem less competent to their board or to their employees? Does it make them seem less credible, or is there actually a boost where it actually helps with credibility?
hmm Yeah, I think it depends on the individual, and to some extent, I think it's a confidence issue. And many CEOs have imposter syndrome. They're like, "Why me? Why am I here? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not any smarter than like the guys. Like the people in my class might have been smarter than me, and I'm running the company, and they're not. Why?"
Mm-hmm.
So there's a confidence issue, and so they worry about being viewed as vulnerable or fallible, and so they strap on the armor and they're infallible. I think personally that is a leadership style that's dying
Mm-hmm.
because people want to follow real humans
Mm-hmm.
that are fallible, and they because they're fallible, they might get it when I make a mistake, which would be nice.
Right.
Um, don't pretend you're perfect. Nobody is. I know that, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to play this game. And so I think what I always did is I led with, hey, I make lots of mistakes. And part of what I'm counting on you to do is to make sure none of these mistakes become big and they
Yeah.
don't get out into the universe. And so call me when I make a mistake because I'm going to make mistakes. If you're pushing the point, you're going to make mistakes. I think the other element, and so that's why the CEOs don't like to, and by the way, nobody likes to admit mistakes for exactly the same reason, but CEOs are just people.
Yeah.
But I think if you transform culturally, just change the words. A mistake is an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing the witch hunt, who's guilty, who screwed up, that's less useful.
Right.
What you
Right.
want to do is what failed in our systems and our methodologies that have caused this to occur, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? That's a
Mm-hmm.
way more interesting conversation to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the mistakes, failures are learning, not because they're going to
Yeah.
happen, you know?
Yeah. No, framing it that way is really important. That's what we try to do here on the podcast is
Yeah.
remind ourselves and remind each other. And you know, I mean, it stings to make a
Yeah.
mistake, even if nobody else noticed it, and you're admitting to yourself that you made a mistake. That stings, even if no one is punishing us. Sometimes we're hard on ourselves. That's human
Yeah.
nature, it seems. To
Well, and I think the educational system doesn't help us any.
Hmm.
You know, you got to strive for 100. Oh, you got that wrong, 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 right? I got one wrong. I got two wrong. For goodness sake, I mean, that's not life. You know, life is I tried something that didn't work out, and then I learned from it.
Yeah. I visited an organization once, and they had cards, and this was in the context of trying to spur a lot of improvement and innovation activity, and these cards said fail, FAIL, first attempt in learning,
Oh, I like that.
and they were trying to remind or like trying to shift the culture, especially I think you mitigate the risk by trying small improvements.
Yep.
And if that fails, that's a learning, and that
Yeah.
prevents trying to do something organization wide that really bombs.
Yeah. I love the phrase fail small, fail quick.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
don't make a big stinky mess and really figure it out as fast as you can that it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I the phrase I don't like is fail early, fail often, because I'm like, well, no. When you fail early and you fail quick and you fail small, you can learn, and then the point is to that should help you succeed.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
that's the whole thing, I'm okay with making a mistake. Just try not to do it twice.
Yeah.
Because that means you didn't learn anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So back to the peer group and the CEO project, and thinking about how it can be lonely at the top. That sounds like it would be a safer environment for a CEO to say things like, "I made a mistake," or "I'm afraid I'm making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Give me feedback, in advance," where maybe that could be prevented, right?
Yeah. Well, and the group, if they're good, they'll go, Mark, you're about to make a giant mistake. And the way I know is I did exactly what you're about to do, and it turned out horribly. Don't do it. Here's what I
Mm-hmm.
think might work better, and now you got another path to work down. And
Mm-hmm.
you have a choice when you hear that. You go, "You're wrong. I'm right." La la la. I don't want to hear you. Right? Claps down.
Right.
But I think enlightened people go, ooh, okay, help me understand why that didn't work. Help me understand if there's any differences that would cause my situation to be okay. You go, nope, it's the same enough that I better not do what I intended to do. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the perfect answer, I think. Thank you. You avoided a big mess. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Jim, I'd love to ask you a little bit about wine, at the time that we have left, and
Sure.
being certified sommelier. So I love wine. I'm fortunate to have friends who love wine, and will share bottles. And one of those friends is a working advanced sommelier. He's a
Wow.
step below the even
Master.
more prestigious master
Yeah,
sommelier
one above me and one below master. That's very, very hard. There's only about 1,000 in the world, by the way.
of the
That's a
master.
very rare distinction.
Yes. So that is his full-time
Yeah.
profession and career. I've also got a friend who I think, like got certified as a non-working professional. So for those who don't know, tell us for one, like what inspires that, and what's involved in
Yeah.
getting that certification.
So the Guild of Master Sommeliers has 4 levels: introductory, certified, advanced, and master. You may have seen the movie on Netflix called Somm. If you
Yeah.
haven't, check it out. It's a lot of fun,
Hmm.
particularly if you like wine. And it talks about the journey of these people to become a master sommelier.
Yeah.
And the idea is sommelier helps people figure out wine and really runs the wine and beverage program in a restaurant. And in a very high end restaurant, like a Michelin star restaurant, they put so much effort and money and time into the food, they
Yeah.
would literally not make a profit if they didn't have a wine program. So the wine program is super
Hmm.
important to make profit. So this is a really important person. And the goal is to be knowledgeable about wine so you can guide people to a great answer, and you can pick wines for the list that works with the menu and so forth. What inspired me is I always enjoyed wine like you do. And I would go to dinner with CEOs, masters of the universe, decision
Hmm.
makers. Somebody would hand them the wine list and they'd get the flop sweat. They're like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to do. Anybody help?
Yeah.
And so I began a journey of learning more and more about wine. I said, and when I used to run, I'm like, I need to have a race to enter so I have a target. Same
Yeah.
thing happened here. I'm like, I'm learning about wine. I need a goal. So first introductory, which I passed fairly easily. And then it took about 2 years for me to become certified. And there are 3 elements to the test. There is a knowledge test. And I spent a lot of time in classes and books
Hmm.
and really boned up on my wine knowledge. And I'm going to say a normal human being could not pass this test. You'd need to really study for it.
Yeah.
Um, then there is a blind tasting component.
Hmm.
And this is where they give you, in the case of certified, of 1 white, 1 red. You have to analyze grape, country, region, quality level, and a variety of other factors on the wine, simply from eyes, nose, mouth.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not as refined as they are at mass. As you go higher, they get weirder and weirder wines, and they get more and more
Right.
information required. But fundamentally, a master sommelier does exactly what I did for both the
Hmm.
theoretical. Their theory's harder, their
Hmm.
tasting is way harder, and then they do service. And this is where we wait a table like you would in a fine restaurant. And in my case, there's a master sommelier there and placards, mother-in-law, wife, guest of honor, whatever.
Hmm.
You have to serve them appropriately, like move around the table in the right direction, pour the right way. And while you're doing this, they're asking you questions. So it's actually a theory test at the same time. And it included things like, um, I'd like a cocktail. I'm thinking about a Rob Roy. What's in a Rob Roy? And you have to know what is in
Hmm.
cocktails. People don't realize.
Yeah.
Sakes, you need to know sake. You have to, after dinner drinks. And then they did things like, I'm having scallops with beurre blanc. What would you recommend as a wine?
Hmm.
2015. Da 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 da. He goes, I don't like that. What else do you? And so you have to have a
Right.
couple of possible pairings for that menu item that they're having, and that's exactly what Hassan would do in a restaurant. And I think the beauty of it is, from a restaurateur's point of view, if you get somebody who's certified or advanced, in the case of your friend, you know what they can do. Like they
Hmm.
can wait a table cold, they can pick wines easy.
Yeah.
Advanced could probably do your whole wine program, pick all your wines on the menu, everything for you. So that's
Yeah.
That's it. And it's a great cert. And now for me, I wrote a book on the topic, but when I go out with CEO clients, they hand me the list and I can give them a nice and interesting experience because I know a little bit about wine. Try wines they never would have tried, pairings they never would have thought of. So I have a lot of fun with it with my clients as well.
Yeah. Okay. So you said, so did I hear you right? You also did write a book about wine?
I did. Yeah. It's called Professional Drinking.
Professional drinking.
Yeah. A spirited guide about wine and spirits, I think it's called. And really it's about how do you entertain around wine and spirits and not make boo-boos. And it turns out that's pretty easy to do if you have a little bit of confidence. It doesn't take a lot to do okay here. I'll give you, if you want, my number one trick.
Please.
Okay. Number one trick. When you go to a nicer restaurant and have a sommelier, most people don't know what wine they want, but they know how much they want to spend. Like, I want to spend $100 for the bottle or whatever your number is. What you do is the sommelier will come up behind you. They're over your shoulder. And you run your finger down the prices. Now, everybody at the table thinks you're pointing at different wines.
Right.
And you
So
go,
this makes it subtle.
I'd like something from this region, please. You point at $100. Every sommelier on the planet knows this fellow wants a $100 bottle of wine. He says, what's everybody having for dinner? Lamb, rabbit, whatever. Wonderful. I'll get you something from that region I think you're really going to enjoy. You look like a genius. And by the way, the somms really enjoy that because they go, ooh, what fun. I get to pick the wine for this table. I can find something cool, different that they never tasted. And sometimes they'll go, I got that one bottle back in the cellar. Nobody's going to buy it, but it'd be perfect for this table. And you get a cool bottle that you never would have picked. So that's my number one trick. If you don't know what to do, just point at the price and the somm will take care of you.
That is a good tip. And I had conversations, this is going back 20 years ago at sort of, it was like a local Whole Foods-ish chain in Phoenix. They had a really good wine program. And the woman who ran the department had previously been in California and worked tasting rooms. And I didn't know, she was probably somm at some level, but I didn't know enough at the time to ask. But we talked enough, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said basically anybody can come in and buy an expensive, ask for an expensive bottle of wine. Not anybody, but but like she didn't find that to be very interesting. But what she loved was somebody coming in and saying like, what's the most interesting thing I can get for $30? That was a challenge that lit her up.
Question.
So because then it's more of a challenge and you're not just pointing to something popular.
Yep. Well, and by the way, somms understand this behavior, which is why Caymus and Silver Oak exist. Highly marketed, honestly, not the best wine for your money. Sorry, Caymus, they'll never sponsor me now, but for the same money, you can get a way more interesting and better bottle of wine. But people go, ooh, I know that. I know that name, and they just buy it, and they go, nobody's going to argue when I bring a bottle of Silver Oak out, right? So so I love her view, and I'm the same way when I'm on the list. Okay, we're going to spend, the Caymus is $125. I'm going to spend $125, but I'm going to blow their socks off with this bottle of wine. So.
And so this is my judgment, but like when you think about mistakes winemakers make, personally, I think it's a mistake when someone limits themselves. And we all know the people who say like, I only drink big, bold California cabs. So my question or asking for advice is if somebody were having a steak or a meal where a Cabernet Sauvignon might be perfect, if they wanted to expand their horizons a little bit, what's a recommendation that would also work?
Well, and a slab and a cab is the saying in the industry is a perfect combination. It really is. So, well, there's a couple ways you could go. You could do a Cabernet Sauvignon, but not from Napa. You go to Chile. Chile makes amazing Cabernet Sauvignon. You could go do a Bordeaux, right? So that's Cabernet dominated, particularly right bank, which is interesting as well. But if they like big, bold, juicy, which is generally New World, right? First is New World. I might go to Argentina and get them a Malbec. It's going to be big and juicy, and Argentina makes a lot of steak, as you know. So steak and Argentina Malbec go great together. And I might not even tell them. I go, just try this. They'll go, wow, it's delicious. They go, yes, and it's not a Cabernet Sauvignon, right? So that would be a couple of moves I might make, is try a different country they've never tried before, or try try Malbec. That might be an interesting move.
Yeah. And then when you think about mistakes a som might make, my observation, this happens, I don't know, a third of the time, enough to be not just a one-off occasion where, let's say it's my wife and I at dinner, or we're at dinner. She's very knowledgeable about wine. And in fact, we might both look at the wine list, but 7 times out of 10, she's holding the list. She orders the wine, and you know who they give the pour to taste it?
I know. Yeah, I know who they do. I had a woman I interviewed.
They're well,
You.
sorry, I'll finish the story and let
Yeah,
you
go
comment.
ahead.
They're giving it to me.
Of
They're being a
course,
little sexist, or
because they're
and I'm like,
misogynistic,
well,
all of them. Yeah.
she ordered it. I mean, like, and so a lot of times, like, if they pour it to me, I'll quite literally hand it
Yeah.
over to her, like, not make a scene, but hopefully that's a reminder to them of like, oh crap, I
Yep.
screwed up.
I had a
But I'm
woman
sorry,
who.
you were going to
No,
say,
I'm tagging on it because I knew the answer to that story. I've
yeah,
heard it before. This is a woman, very powerful, successful CEO woman in this region. And I'm like, Linda, what do you do when the sommelier hands you the menu? She goes, they never hand me the menu. I'm like, but
mm,
you're paying for the dinner. It's your meeting 9 times
oh,
out of 10. She goes, yeah, I'm a woman. They hand it to some dude who works for me. And
yeah,
she makes a little bit of a fuss. She goes, she'll take the
mm-hmm,
menu and she'll
mm-hmm,
go, I want to make sure you realize I'm paying for dinner. And all of a
yeah,
sudden they gets their attention, right? Not
yeah,
the guy who works for her, but the som. Like
right,
you're talking
right.
to the wrong person here. So anyway, so
Oof.
yeah, this is a
That's
classic
mistake
problem.
number one of who you're handing the menu to. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely
Oh.
right.
All right. Well, that was a fun detour, Jim. Thank you
Yeah,
for
you could do a whole show on
and
wine.
well, maybe we'll come back and do that again. So, our guest today, Jim Schleckser, he's the founder and CEO of the CEO Project. Look in the show notes for links to that website, and I will put links to the books in there. And I'm going to check out that book, Professional Drinking. I mean, I get the title. I like to say I'm tasting, not
Yeah.
drinking, but maybe
Okay.
that's being a little defensive.
Yeah. That's funny. I just want the
But
job. Professional drinking, I'm in.
well, Jim, thanks so much for being a guest here today. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks for your stories and your insights.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mark. It was a
Sure.
pleasure.